These are strange times, and I do not profess to have any answers to the tragedy of the modern world. But I have a few thoughts for what those are worth. This is not a video about non-compete litigation or trade secret cases, discrimination, retaliation. This is not a video directly discussing those types of cases. It's much broader than that. It's a video about life and philosophy and my perspective on things, and it explains a lot of why I do the work that I choose to do. These are wild times, and it's rough out there for lots of people. I left my office one day a couple months ago. I was walking down the street. It was starting to rain. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I saw some folks sitting outside of a church, on the steps outside of the church. And at first I didn't know what this was, but then as I walked by, I read the sign and I realized it was a soup kitchen. It was a church that had a soup kitchen. It's about 3 in the afternoon, and they didn't open the doors to serve food until 4, but there were already several people who had gotten there an hour early to sit on the stairs outside in the cold rain and wait so they could get a hot meal and a bowl of soup. And you see things like that, everywhere you look. People are homeless or living in a motel or dealing with terrible struggle and tragedy and hardship. And I think that there's a light, okay? There is a light that some folks carry out into the darkness, both for themselves and also for humanity and their brothers and sisters and for the world. There is a light, and you can't let that light go out. And you have to fight to keep it alive, and you have to guard it from the world and from all the wind and the rain and the elements that will extinguish it and put that light out. You have to carry that light. When I was 19 or 20, I dropped out of college and I wound up living in San Diego. I had gotten some money that summer from Goldman Sachs. I'd been in a program at Goldman Sachs, so I'd gotten some money from that. I'd saved some money working at a summer camp in Colorado. And so in the fall, I moved to San Diego. I dropped out of college and moved to San Diego because I owed Cornell a couple $1,000s I did not have. This is back before they changed all their financial aid policies. This is back when, if your family made 40 or 50 grand, they would look at you and tell you, okay, you owe us $6,000. That's your contribution, right? And they factored my contribution based on my father. And I was totally estranged from my father. He's not going to give me $1. He didn't have much to begin with, but I just couldn't afford to stay there. And it was too gray for me. It was cold as shit, but the gray was really what got me. And so I got a little bit of money that summer, and I decided I'm going to just start my life over. I'm going to move to San Diego, take another run at it. This was right after 9/11 hit. I moved there right before 9/11, then 9/11 hit. I couldn't get a job. The way I looked certainly didn't help with that. I remember one day I read in the newspaper about an open test for a government job. It was a really good job. You didn't need a degree or anything like that. You needed a high school diploma. You didn't need a college degree. And they had open testing scheduled one morning. You had to be there at 6 a.m. to take this test. And so I woke up at 4:30 and I got dressed, got in my car, got some coffee, drove out to this location. And when I got there, there were literally hundreds of cars in line in a traffic jam. And this guy who worked there, some probably 50 or 60-year-old black guy, was out directing traffic, and he came up to the window of my car and he said, "Son, it's not even worth it trying to wait. There's already at capacity inside, and there's more people, who are waiting in case somebody decides they don't want to go through with the test, and there's no way you'll ever make it in at this point. You're just wasting your time sitting here in this traffic. You'd be better off just to turn around and go home." So I turned around and went back to my house. I was renting a room from this older woman in her house. She lived there. One or two other folks lived there, rented rooms. So worked as a waiter, worked construction. I remember I was driving to work one day working construction, and I blew a tire, and I pulled into a parking lot. I went to a phone booth. I looked up the location for a tire shop. There was one not too far away, not even a mile. So I drove my car about a mile to the tire shop. I went in, and there was this young Mexican homie at the front desk, probably 25, 26. And I asked him about getting another tire, and I think he could tell that I was stressed out and in a rough spot. And I was trying to get to work, and I was broke. And this kid, he tells me, he's like, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I can get you the best tire possible. I'll get you a used tire, the best one I can get you, installed for $40. And when he said that almost broke my spirit, because I didn't have $40 and I didn't get paid until Friday. And that was going to eat up a bunch of what I got paid, because I worked at fucking Labor Ready for not even like $6 an hour. And I asked if I could leave my car there, and he said, "Yeah, it's no problem. I'll get it fixed for you. It'll be ready to go Friday when you come back. Like, just hang in there, man. It'll be all right." So I walked to the bus stop, and I took a bus. I got off. I walked to the job site. I got there a bit late, but it was okay, because the foreman, he knew that I was legit, I was always on time. I worked hard. He'd even said to me, like jobs that he would give me to do, I'd be finished with it in 3 hours, and it would take somebody else 8 or 9 hours. And I told him I was sorry for being late. I blew a tire, and he said he understood. It was no problem. I got paid Friday. I got my car back. I had to eat cans of sardines for a little while. I don't say that like to suggest that I've had any terribly tragic or hard life. I haven't. I've had a very good life. My life is a very good life, and I'm a very blessed person. And my blessings, I have so many of them. I say this in the sense that I get it. I get it. I understand struggle. I've been so fortunate and blessed to avoid the terrible, utterly tragic, and the real tragedy and hardship that so many people endure. But I had enough of a taste of it that I get it. And I'm so blessed. I am blessed in so many ways, starting with my mother, who was my first best friend in the world. The single strongest and most resilient person that I have ever known, who taught me that you find a way. You find a way. You keep going and you find a way. And at the same time, the person who taught me grace and taught me and still teaches me. My God, it took me until 42 or 43 to actually understand what it means to extend grace to other people, to say, there by the grace of God go I. And I understand and I forgive. And we're only all human. And I know it gets hard out there, right? It took me half of my life, if I'm lucky. And not just my mother, right? My father, yeah, I had beef with my dad. Yeah, my dad struggled with depression. He was a narcissist, a disciplinarian. You could call him abusive. He had all kinds of shit. He did all kinds of terrible shit. But even there, I took so much away, right? You have to get out. You have to go through life, and then you can look back and you can see. I can look back and I can see the things that I took away, that I learned from him. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I remember my father saying to me, Jonathan, I don't make much money, but I have my own business. I'm my own man. I do what I want. I work with the customers who I want to work with. I work with the people who I like, who I respect. And I reserve the right at the end of the day to tell anybody I don't like that they can go fuck themselves. I see you, Pops. I see you. I would not be a lawyer. I would not be a businessman. I would not own my own business. I would not be so utterly and unrepentantly unemployable. I am utterly unemployable. Because I reserve the right to go my own way, to do what I believe in, to work with the folks I want to work with. And at the end of the day, to tell anybody I want that they can go fuck themselves and I don't need their business. That means something to me. That matters to me. And I wouldn't have that. That wouldn't be part of who and what I am if it wasn't for my old man. So my father has a small business. To this day, he still has a small business. He still loads trucks. He's in his mid-70s. My mother's father owned a small business. It was a dry cleaner. My father's grandfather worked at Bethlehem Steel. He was an inventor. So I was blessed with all of this, right? These people, my ancestors, the folks I came from, that's the thing. I grew up working class, and sometimes things were hard, sometimes things were tough. But I was so blessed to come from people who are capable, who are competent, who figure shit out, who make stuff happen. And I lucked out. I lucked out in that lottery, right? Because a big part of that is the lottery. I come from smart, capable folk, and they handed that down to me. And I lucked out with that. I was blessed with that. And I lucked out here, and then I got a little bit of a spark, but that was more of my own forging, because I took that spark, I took that glimmer, and I refused to let it die. I was in second grade. And stuff at home was really not nice. And my father was what you would classify as abusive. And my teacher, my second grade teacher, my God, she was a screamer. She was like the Wicked Witch of the West. She would scream. She was mean. She was nasty. She would laugh at you. She would talk down to you. She would rip you to shreds. And oh, by the way, she would make 2 kids from the class come up every class period and give her back massages while she graded papers. It's a throwback for you, right? The fuck is that? All kinds of stuff popped off that year. And I had the realization of like, wow, the world is a pretty fucked up place. I knew that at 7 in second grade. I knew the world is a fucked up place. There are lots of these adults running around out here who are all mixed up and angry and sad and scared and hurt, and they're taking it out on other people. I knew all that shit when I was 7. And I went forward in my life, you know. And I had so many blessings. I had so many teachers and coaches and professors and mentors along the way. And dear friends and just beautiful people I knew. And I lucked out and managed to avoid the real big sweeping tragedies. But by 19 or 20, here I was, right, dropped out of school. San Diego, working temp labor ready. And I go flat broke. I don't have any money anymore. So I leave San Diego. And I'm sleeping in my car. And I drive west. And I get out into Arizona. I go through Yuma in the morning. I stopped in Yuma and I actually went to the YMCA because I was a YMCA member from back home in PA. And I had my Pennsylvania YMCA membership card, and I stopped at the YMCA in Yuma and I asked them if I could work out. And they said, sure, go ahead, work out. So I went to the gym, I hit some weights, got back in the car, got a full tank of gas. I was wearing shorts and a sleeveless shirt. It was hot. It was like 102 degrees in Yuma. And that evening I had gotten up into the mountains by Flagstaff. And I was running low on gas. So I stopped to get gas. And I was thinking about where I was going to stay for the night because I had slept in my car to try and save money. And so I get out at the gas station in my sleeveless shirt and shorts. And it's dark now. Evenings come on. It's getting dark and it's cold. It's cold. And this pickup truck pulls up at the pump across from me. Big black pickup truck on big tires. Homie jumps out. It's a white guy. I can't place how old he is because I'm so much older now. But I think he was probably 35, maybe 40. He was wearing a leather jacket, a brown leather jacket, heavy. And it had those strings, right, hanging off at those little thin strands. And he looks at me and he says, man, where'd you come from? Down in Yuma. And I said, yes, sir, I came from Yuma. And he says, I know, I was down there this morning. So you're up in the mountains now, man. It's cold as hell up here. And he asked me where I'm going. And I tell him I had been living in San Diego and I ran out of money. And he can see, right? I'm 19 or 20. I got all my stuff in the back of my station wagon. He can see it through the back windows. I'd been sleeping in the back of it. I got my clothes there. I carved out a spot where I could lay down and cover up with a blanket or some other clothes. I tell him I'm trying to make my way back across the country, back to Pennsylvania. And I might stop here for the night if I could find a good place to kind of camp out in my car. He tells me there's a Walmart. He points up the road. He says, you go out this way about 2 miles, you're going to hit a Walmart. And there's lots of big trucks and trailers that park out there. Nobody bothers them. They're allowed to do that. And they park out there. They camp out and sleep there overnight. And he says, if you just pull right in between a couple of them, you'll be fine. Nobody should bother you. Then he takes a pause and he says, you have a weapon. And I say, no, I don't know, sir. I don't have a weapon. He unzips his jacket and he reaches into his jacket and he pulls out this big knife. It's carved on a handle, some kind of animal bone. It's carved on like a deer bone handle. It's a big ass blade in a sheath. And he hands it to me. I'm at this gas pump, he's at this gas pump. He pulls out this knife on this ornate deer bone that was carved by somebody. And he hands it to me. And he just looks at me and he says, take this with you, brother, just in case. Not saying anything's going to happen, not saying you're going to need it, but take it just in case. And I said, oh, I can't take this, sir. I mean, like this, somebody made this for you. And he said, no, I insist, you take it. He says, you take it, I got other ones, you take it. So I took it and I said, thank you. And he got into his big truck and I got into my Plymouth Reliant station wagon and I drove out to the Walmart. And I slept in the back of my station wagon. And I slept with that knife right beside me in its sheath. I rigged up some bed sheets around the windows with some duct tape so nobody could see into the back and see that I was in there. I got out into Oklahoma a couple days later and my car died on the highway. I'd gotten a battery replaced. And then that evening, when I was coming through a small town in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, my battery started to go out again. The lights started to fade. The radio started to go out. I was on the highway and I was like, fuck, this is not good. I got off at the next exit. Kind of went up a little bit of an incline. Top of the exit, my car dies. Car dies, power shuts off. I coast down this hill. There's a motel right there. It's $25 a night. $25 a night motel. So my car's dead. I throw it into park. It's parked across like 3 spots out front of the motel. I go in. This white gentleman, probably in his 60s. He said, "Can I help you, young man?" And I asked him if they have any rooms available. And he says, "Absolutely, we got them available." And he says, "It gets you a room, gets me keys." Like, you can pull your car around back if you want. Park it right by your room. That's more convenient. And I explained to him, "Well, I'm sorry, sir." I said, it's parked across 3 spaces out front. I apologize, but it's dead. And he says, "Well, what happened?" I tell him, I said, "Well, I got a new battery, and then it died. The new battery just crapped out." And he says, "Well, it sounds like your alternator. There's no Riley Brothers up the street, about a mile. I'll take you there in the morning." Then he says to me, you looking for work?" And I say, "Well, It depends. I said, it depends on how long I'm going to have to be here and if they can fix the car. And he says, well, if you want to just work for a day or two, make some money, pay for your car or whatever. He's like, buddy owns a construction company. I said, yeah, sure, I'll work. So he gets me a couple days of work. The next morning, he takes me down to O'Reilly Brothers. I wake up, I get some coffee in the motel. It's a motel. He gets me some coffee. He gives me a ride in his pickup truck down to the O'Reilly Brothers, where I inquire about the alternator. They tell me what it's going to cost, and they say they got to order it. It'll come in a day or two. So they order the alternator. He drives me back to the motel. He gets me linked up with his buddy. His buddy picks me up. I go do some work for a day or two. The alternator comes in. He takes me up to O'Reilly Brothers, pick up the alternator, brings it back to the motel. And he says, hey, I'll put this in for you. I say, what? He said, no, it's no problem. No problem, young man. I'll put it in for you. It's not a hassle. Opens up the hood. This Plymouth station wagon, the lady who owned it, who I bought it from, I bought it from a dealership, but she had traded it into the dealership. She was in her late 80s. She barely drove the thing. But she had this huge aftermarket air conditioning unit installed. And so when he opened the hood to get to the alternator, he actually had to take out this air conditioning unit. And this man, he stood out there for an hour and 15 minutes. He took out the air conditioning unit. He installed the alternator. He reinstalled the air conditioning unit. Wiped off his hands like it was no big deal. And said, hey, turn it on. See how it does. Turn it on, ran fine. I said, boss, what do I owe you? He said, you don't owe me anything, man. Good luck. You take care out there. You be safe. That's a shepherd. That's a shepherd. At the time, I knew that it was so benevolent, it was so kind, it was so generous. I knew that, I understood that, and I was grateful and thankful. The Mexican homie at the tire store who got me the best tire he could get and made it $40. The guy in the leather coat who gave me the knife, the man who owned the motel in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma who put my alternator in and got me a couple days of work. That's a shepherd. I didn't understand all of it until many, many years later, until basically now. But now I see it and I know it and I understand it and I realize it through the being, through my own existence, through my own life. That's a shepherd. And so I got back to Pennsylvania in the middle of winter, and I was flat broke and I was depressed. I managed to get a job writing for an organization in California. It was a nonprofit. I got a job writing for them, but it wasn't very many hours. I got as many hours as I could pick up from them, but it was no more than about 15 hours a week. But I was making $15 an hour, which is way more than I could have made anywhere in small town Pennsylvania at the time. So I went out and tried to find another job, like a part-time job, so I could make some more money, so I could save some money and then pay my way back into Cornell because I owed them a couple $1,000 balance. I'll do part 2.